All right. Okay. Well, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for filminquiry.com, movieswithmark.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. You can read all my reviews there, as well as a few of the films we'll be talking about today. So, been a while. We got to catch up on a few films. We're going to be talking about Renfield, which came out last weekend. It's the the Nicolas Cage vampire movie with another Nicholas Hoult in it. We'll also be talking about Beau's Afraid, the new Ari Aster film, which is it's more or less what you'd expect from an Ari Aster film. So we'll get into that, and then we'll be talking about On a Wing and a Prayer, a biographical film about a man trying to land a plane. So yeah, we got a lot to talk about today. A little bit of a recap, though, about 2 weekends ago we did Anime Detour, and it was a blast. I had a lot of fun there. I did post one of the panels that we did there, the film year in review. There's another panel I recorded there as well. So yeah, just a lot of fun, great community. Just it was fun to just meet a lot of people there, especially to do the autism and anime panel. That one was a lot of fun. So, all right. So if you like these movie reviews, a little bit early. I didn't get to cover as much today because Detour threw a wrench into things, and stuff gets thrown out of whack. But I'm trying to get back on track here, just because April's been crazy. I have not even come close to covering all the films this week. I didn't get around to seeing Evil Dead or Chevalier, because between all those and Beau's Afraid are coming out this weekend, so it's a lot to keep up with. So I'm gonna be doing my best here. So why don't we just jump right in to the big film I wanted to talk about here. I just got to get all my titles corrected here. There we are. Okay, Beau is Afraid. All right, let me just get a little water here and some notes. This is going to be a fun one. This is an Ari Aster film we saw in IMAX. It's 3 hours long. All right, make sure I got my notes here so I don't mispronounce anyone's name, obviously. This one has been getting a lot of interesting reactions from people, just because I don't think people were prepared for just what Ari Aster was going to do with this 3 hour weird voyage, but damn, he surprises you. It's one of those films where you're not going to be able to recommend it to everyone, which is great. It's great. You want to have a film that feels like it's trying something new. So, okay, here we go in 3, 2, 1. So, Beau is Afraid is the new horror film from Ari Aster, whose previous works include Hereditary and Midsommar, and oh, shoot. Dang it. Hang on. Sorry, I got got a little something in my throat there. That's why I always do multiple takes, Yes. Okay. Sorry. That's one of the interesting is when I do my video essays, I do multiple takes just because I got to get my voice ready and all that. And that's why I usually record these reviews and like do a second take, just because it screws it up. All right, but enough of my bullshit. This is not your problem. We don't care about that. Let's get to the movie. All right. All right. And in 3, 2, 1. So, Beau is Afraid is the new horror film from Ari Aster, who's done films like Hereditary and Midsommar. And if you've seen those films, I think like you're decently prepared for what Beau is Afraid is going to be like, but you're still going to be surprised. Like it's very much like outside of like the usual type of film that he does, specifically because this film, like it is a horror, and it is very terrifying. It's surreal, but the most interesting thing about the film is that it's a comedy, and I know that like aspects of Hereditary and Midsommar, they do have like comedic elements woven in there, but Beau is Afraid is just like, it's one of those films that's just like, it's so absurd that like it has to be funny because it's so cruel and dark with how it's trying to portray this kind of like over the top world that all dumps on this one guy, that you have to have some absurdity with it. And to its credit, the film does that wonderfully while still like keeping you guessing about where this film is going. Because like I feel like you know, it's impossible to describe just like how weird this film is without going through it like blow by blow. Especially since there's like some huge spoilers towards the end, so I'm not going to try to do that here. I'm just going to try to like best convey how strange this film is, and I feel like that's a little bit of like a tall order, because like Aster's films, you know, like if you look at like Hereditary, Midsommar, they're already pretty weird and surreal and have like cerebral elements to it. So saying that this film is weird and surreal, I think like is not going to do it justice here. Like it's on a much higher level than those other films are. So the whole premise of the film is that you have Joaquin Phoenix playing Beau, this this kind of like middle-aged guy who's been terrified his entire life. He's always felt like, you know, he hasn't really had any much agency. He hasn't been in control of his life, and that everything just goes wrong for him with like trauma that's been like deep-seated within him since childhood. And I love this kind of desperation that comes out of this performance from like a character who looks much older. Like Phoenix here, he's balding, he's gray, he's fat, he's out of shape, and he's got wrinkles all over his face, and he has like this helpless look about him the entire time that just, you can't help but feel bad for this guy, especially because like his problems that arise in this film, like they range from like, you know, like relatable stuff that would put you on edge to just like over the top stuff, like, you know, just exaggerating the ridiculousness of it. You know, kind of like an episode of The Simpsons. I say that it has a lot of relation to The Simpsons because if you're familiar with like The Simpsons and Futurama, how they'd always have like ridiculous signage in the background, there's tons of that in this film. Like Beau's world is filled with like the weirdest background sites of sex shops, and there's like a weird anti-abortion advertisement. There's like the TV dinners, if I remember correctly, it's a combination of like potatoes and pineapple, and it says like the best of Italian and it's like the best of like Irish and Hawaiian cuisine. And these are just like, and they're in the background, but there's so much like laugh out loud moments that you can't help yourself, that you're laughing at this stuff while you're feeling for this guy who's going through a lot. So the whole premise is that Beau has to go home to visit his mother on the anniversary of his father's death, who's been dead since before he was born. And he has issues about going to see his mother, and when he learns that his mother might be dead, then it becomes like all the more urgent that he's got to get out there. But everything goes wrong for him. Like, you know, his apartment complex is a nightmare. You know, he has problems like, you know, getting up on time for flights. You know, he loses track of long passages of time. And just like there's there's so much for him to be afraid of in this world, because like I feel like it'd be too easy for someone to look at like a more grounded version of this story and just say like, dude, this dude has to get over it. But no, there's tons for Beau to be afraid of in this world. There's medication that goes awry. There's therapists he can't trust. There's deadly spiders that are loose in his apartment. He doesn't have any water in his apartment. If it's not just like at one point, like people break into his apartment, and it feels like it's the entire block that goes in there to ruin his place. So you feel so bad for him. And as the film keeps going on, like it just gets weirder and weirder with the different people he encounters. Like at one point, he meets a couple who take him in, played by Amy Ryan and Nathan Lane, who, my goodness, Nathan Lane in this film is like that kind of like weird type of like it's not like the over the top eccentric that you'd expect from Nathan Lane, but kind of like that kind of like, chipper, I'm here for you but I'm not really here for you type of sympathy. Because you can tell like he wants to do the right thing, but he doesn't always, and he kind of loses track of people and doesn't always have their best interest at heart. Not to mention, it was so weird hearing like Nathan Lane saying like, like, you got to get dressed, my dude. Just casually stating these kind of like dad lines, which is just bizarre. So you feel like, Beau can't trust these people because, they want to care for people, but they can't. So there's a lot of dangerous people that they associate with. They can't raise their kid. They have like an army veteran who they place too much faith in. They grieve in the weirdest way. And it's just like, I know like I'm getting close to being like blow by blow, and I'm trying not to, but it's strange. Like it's one of those films that like I said, you almost have to describe it just to communicate how weird it is. I guess I'll say like, the film has great passages of trying to, further elaborate on Beau's situation and what is going through his mind. Like, we slowly get elements of his past that come about, and a lot of his memories are, like, clouded. You're not quite sure if they're, like, nightmares or dreams. You get to see, like, this kind of, like, this longing for love, but, like, fearing that you're not going to be able to reciprocate it, which becomes absolutely terrifying as the rest of the film goes on. Because towards the end of the film, it feels like Beau is just one victory away from like, changing his life and having a happy ending and, everything working out for him. And just when you think like that's within reach, it's like it's pulled away. It's like for every one step that he takes forward, there's like 10 steps that send him back. Every time he thinks he's at that point where he's going to get some acceptance and some help, and someone will actually show him love that he doesn't have to repay like 10 times over. And especially like when you have an amazing cast. Like at one point, I won't spoil it, but Bill Hader is in this film. And it's a blink and you'll miss it moment. But just keep your eyes peeled. He plays one character in this film, and you kind of have to like peer at the screen. And it's like, wait, was that Bill Hader? There's a few other like recognizable actors in here, like immediately like when I heard like Richard Kine's voice over the phone, like you could tell that he was coming. You have who else? Just like an amazing assortment of Parker Posey has a great role as kind of like this love interest that Beau has been holding out for, and she has some like weird and like equal parts like weird and erotic scenes that are pretty interesting. You have Stephen Henderson, who you might know from like a few films, like like Ladybug and Dune. He shows up here in a very surprisingly sinister role. Like he always feels like that kind of like that vessel of he has like a face you can trust. And I think when you see him in this film, like it's all the more terrifying, where I feel like I want to see this guy in more horror films, like a lot more. He has an amazing presence. So just like an amazing cast, and just very, I guess the best way to like, I'm trying to find the right words to describe it. I feel like the best words might be just like experimental, just because you have no idea where this film is going. Like there's animated passages, there's fantasies that Beau gets lost within, there's thrilling elements of, there's social commentary. Like at one point he's confronted by a cop. There's, like I said, there's lots of comedic elements, and they the comedy bleeds into everything here. Like at one point, probably the most horrific moment in the film is a scene where like Beau is stabbed by, I'm trying to remember the exact name, but it's called like the birthday suit boy killer or whatever. It's just a naked guy running around the neighborhood stabbing people. And like he chases after Beau and like starts stabbing him, and it's horrific, but at the same time you're kind of laughing too, because you're like, just like this naked guy with his dick out and he's stabbing people, and there's other people who are attacking him, and they're all like exaggerated people that you almost like question like if all this is in Beau's head. But thankfully I don't think that the film resorts to like making that like an easy out. I feel like if the film did that, it would rob everything of like the weirdness that's going on here, where you're feeling all the anxiety and paranoia that goes through Beau's mind through this like unorthodox journey that just gets weirder and weirder and weirder, to the point where there's a monster in the film that if I told you what the monster is, I doubt you believe me. It's one of those things that you just have to see for yourself. Yeah, but in another way, like at some point you get to a point where you're almost kind of like, okay, this is kind of like what I expected from like, you know, Aster's previous films, but then it would keep going. Even when it gets to the point where it feels like Beau's reached his destination, it feels like there's another weirder development. And just when you think like that is where the film would end, it gets weirder and weirder and weirder, to the point where there's like this very, very cathartic end to it that has the it kind of has like the same effect of like, if you've ever seen End of Evangelion, there's a scene where just like you're watching a theater, basically like a theater room full of people, and then it's empty and it kind of like reflects on the audience. There's a similar scene like that towards the end, and it's like it's weird, like it's creepy and it's deeply unsettling, and it occurs in a very strange and bizarre place that it's just it just feels like a nightmare. It's a nightmare that like you can't escape from, that's exaggerated because you can tell it's trying to be a comedy, but at the same time it's a relatable type of comedy that just kind of creeps under your skin and kind of gives you like a little bit of like easement, I think, with having like the weird signage, because like it continues with everything in the film. Just when you think like you've gotten over the comedy part, there's another absurd element that will either weave itself into Beau's situation or just be in the background to see. And I like that because it adds this kind of like weird levity to it, because this is, when you get down to the bare bones of it, this is a deeply cruel film about a pitiful character who is just dumped on, and there's no hope for him in this film. No one is coming to save him. Nobody is going to give him even like characters who seem like they are going to offer some help, they will eventually either, you know, find a way to turn on him, or somebody else will come in and ruin everything. And so you have like this deep, deep hopelessness over the picture. And you kind of just have to laugh at that at some point. So the fact that like Aster has all these exaggerated little elements in there to kind of like make you laugh, I think it's such a perfect mixture. Now, I feel like I have to find some way to say this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Because, I mean, it's very surreal. It's very weird. It's not a very grounded film. It kind of goes all over the place. Like I said, like there's an animated sequence, there's fantasy sequences. It jumps all over the place that I don't think if you're not on board for like the general theme of it and the absurdity to embrace, you're probably not going to like this film, especially for the fact that it's 3 hours long. Because I'll be honest, I love this film, but I'm going to be honest here. This film's going to piss off a lot of people. So if you like going in to see horror films that are grounded, that have like, you know, a firm arc, basically if you can stand like a David Lynch film, you could probably get through Beau's Afraid. Probably. Like I said, this is definitely Aster's most high concept film, and it is going to turn a lot of people off. And I feel like we've been seeing a lot of that trend with a lot of films, like Babylon, these 3-hour epics where directors who have proven themselves have been given the creative freedom to do whatever they want. And I love that Aster did it here because, I mean, I saw this film in IMAX, and I still can't believe that I saw this weird, surreal, cerebral trip on the IMAX screen. It's just, and the fact that they got this amazing cast for it as well. It blows my mind to see a film like this, and I absolutely love it. So, this is definitely one of my favorite films this year, but it needs a heavy warning. If you haven't been on board for Aster's previous films and you're not willing to see him go further into the deep end of psychological horror that creeps under your skin and makes you uncomfortably laugh at moments where almost you feel like you shouldn't, this is not going to be, if you're not into that, this is not going to be your film. But if you're willing to see very weird and experimental films that are highly unpredictable, you got to see Beau is Afraid. I absolutely love this film. So there you go. Beau is Afraid is currently playing. Yeah, I believe it's been out for a while now on the East Coast, but it's playing right now in theaters everywhere. So if you get done with Evil Dead, go check out Beau is Afraid. All right. Whew. Well, I had a lot to say on that one, which is good because I don't have as much to say on the rest of the films that we'll be talking about, but we'll see. So let's talk about Renfield, eh? Okay, let me get my notes up here. 2, 1. So Renfield can be referred to as the Nicolas Cage Dracula movie, for obvious reasons, but yeah, it's a horror comedy, and I think that this is going to be one of those films where I feel like the casting saves so much of this film, and it's like the main reason to come and see it, which is great for like the marketing of this, because I mean, think about how you're going to sell this film. It's Nicolas Cage as Dracula, and it plays up Nicolas Cage in the Dracula role as you would expect. You want to see him campy, you want to see him, chewing scenery, you want to see him in like ridiculous outfits and just having a ball with this role. And he does. And yeah, if that's like the sole reason you're coming to see this film, you will not be let down. But thankfully, so much of the casting and I think just the general tone of this film pull it together so well. Because obviously, by the title, this is not just about Dracula. It's about Renfield, played by Nicholas Hoult. The Renfield, of course, the right-hand man of Dracula, and it's an interesting concept because you have Renfield considering, he's worked for Dracula long enough and starts realizing, maybe it's not the best being the henchman for like this monster who sucks the blood of people and is just cruel to everybody, especially me. So maybe I might want to try to find a life for myself. So I like that Renfield is this character who's trying to take some agency in his life. He attends a therapy group of other people who've been in toxic relationships and tries to find a way to get over Dracula. Now that's an interesting concept, and I feel like that would be good enough for like a short film. But this is a movie that definitely wants to have fun with that material, and I feel like with the toxic relationship angle, I feel like there's only so much you can have in terms of like comedy and drama, because with this movie it feels like it's trying to walk this fine line between actually being earnest about having self-esteem and standing up to someone who's abusing you in a relationship, while at the same time being a very ridiculous film that's overloaded with blood, guts, and gore and has fun with like the vampire concept. And it tries to balance it throughout this film. And there are scenes where they try to do both at the same time, and it's clearly not working. Like one element is more dominant than the other. And clearly, whenever Nick Cage is in a scene as Dracula, he's camping it up. You can't help but laugh, even in scenes where he's meant to be absolutely terrifying and you're supposed to be feeling sorry for Renfield. you're kind of like on the edge. You're like you're laughing, but at the same time, it's like, oh, you feel bad for this guy, like, but I feel bad for Holt, but I'm laughing with Cage, so it's like you're kind of torn. I think it's more surprising that so many of those scenes, there are more scenes like that work than ones that kind of like fall apart in trying to pick and choose the different tones that it's going for. So to give this film more to do, it takes place in a city, and Dracula ends up hooking up with the mafia. And not just any mafia, but like a mafia that controls the city and openly admits that like they're evil. They're like, hey, if you're a villain, come on by. That's our whole game. And I think that's why it works so well that you have Ben Schwartz playing one of the mob enforcers, and he is having way too much fun in this role. Like he's giddy, he's goofy, he takes like violent pleasure in everything that he does. That it's just every interaction that he has with Dracula, and his mafia mother is just so wonderful. And his mafia mother is Bella, played by what's her name? Shora. I always mispronounce her name. Shora Agladashu. I'm swearing. I mean, she has a deep voice, and she's great as kind of like this kind of like calculative mob boss. So yeah, Dracula has allies that he's teaming up with, and thankfully Renfield does as well. He hooks up with a cop trying to take down this mafia as well. The cop is Rebecca, played by Awkwafina. And I feel like at this point, like Awkwafina is getting typecasted in roles where she's mostly expected to react and yell at everything that is going on and overreact to every situation. It feels like she's been doing that with nearly every film, with, you know, like with stuff like Crazy Rich Asians and Jumanji. And it feels like the only time she's gotten out of that comfort zone was, you know, with stuff like The Farewell, which, by the way, if you're dogging on Awkwafina, go watch The Farewell and you will see her at her best. But I feel like for this type of film, she works well because like she's mostly expected just to react to all the violence here and just be like, you know, yeah, this is messed up. So more or less acting as an overreactive audience surrogate. And on that level, she mostly gets the job done. And I feel like they use just enough of her, especially for a film like this, which is 90 minutes long and breezes by with the pace. Like it's tightly edited. It's quick. Like it has a lot of like fun avenues that it pursues. Like I really did like the opening introduction where you get to see Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Hoult in their roles, but in the setting of like the 1930s Dracula movie, like shot for shot, line for line, and it looks really cool. It's just like oh, this is kind of neat. Like you could almost shoot the entire 1930s Dracula film with them because they inhabit the role. And I feel like that's a great way to start the film, because if you can buy them in those types of roles, you can get used to them and appreciate like the campiness, because for as much as like Nicholas Hoult kind of plays like a desperate character, he's also a charming one. Like he also like he sees like, you know, a little bit of like the bright side of his dire situation. He takes a little bit of pleasure in the fact that, you know, he can eat bugs and then violently murder people, and he tries to do the right thing. He tries to get only the bad people that Dracula can eat, but then eventually realizes, you know what, I can't keep this up, and I eventually got to fight Dracula. And I feel like that's where, you know, Awkwafina's character comes in perfectly for giving him a little bit of boost in confidence, and also just the violence and gore here. Like if you're wondering if this film is violent, yes, it is very, very, very violent and gory. To the point where in one scene in the film, Nicholas Hoult rips off someone's arm and then impales someone else with that arm. So lots of dismemberment, lots of there's some decapitation, there's blood, there's guts all over the place. You get to see like Nicolas Cage in much grosser makeup for when Dracula is healing after having suffered like a lot of damage. So you get to see a very grotesque version of him. There's a lot of gross out moments in this, which is wonderful. Especially for the fact that, you know, this film is also, you know, it's horror and it's comedy, but it's a lot of action as well. There's a lot of fight scenes where Renfield takes on just hordes of hitmen and just savages them in the most brutal way. And it's all like quickly paced and absurd, where you have them chopping off arms and lunging at people and ripping out guts and making just these big blood explosions. At one point, I won't reveal who it is, but at one point he punches someone so hard that blood comes out of their face and poop comes out of them at the same time. And I love how they set it up with kind of that classic almost kind of like kung fu, almost like Fist of the North Star style, where they show you the x-rays of what's going on internally to give you a little preview of what's to come, and then you see the explosion, and it's uproarious. So the film is not perfect, like I said. The tone that it's trying to balance here doesn't always quite work, and it might be a little weird to get into a film where Dracula is teaming up with the mafia, and the mafia is just yes, we are evil. I'm not even exaggerating. That's verbatim one of the lines they say. Yeah, we're the mob, and we're evil. Yeah, that's us. But yeah, in terms of being a campy film, which is I imagine what a lot of people are going to be coming into this for. It's Nicolas Cage. You want to see him turned up to 11, which is the best kind of Cage you could have for this type of film. And I say for this type of film because Cage has done more subtle and great performances and stuff in stuff like Pig. Pig is a wonderful film to see understated Cage. But if Cage is Dracula, you want him to have fun. And he is having fun in this film. And with the quick pacing and the over-the-top blood and guts and just the surprisingly witty lines that come out of this script at times, for as absurd as it gets, it's a great bit of quick, wicked fun. So yeah, I know a lot of people are going to have issues with it because they don't feel the tone always works, and Awkwafina might not be the best in a few scenes, and you feel like it's getting a little bit too giddy with its content. I've heard a few people say this. Personally, I feel like it's just the right amount of ridiculousness mixed in with an earnest story of someone trying to change that it works well. I feel like had 30 minutes been tacked onto this where it just kept going over and over with the same gags, it would have become tiresome and exhausting. But thankfully it's not. It's a perfectly tight and silly horror film where Renfield rips off people's arms and Nicolas Cage drinks blood, and Ben Schwartz just is having a ball. I mean, everyone in this film is having a ball. It's a lot of fun. That's the best way I can describe it, because I mean, what more do you need? It's Nicolas Cage as Dracula. That should be all you need to go. So Renfield, it's currently in theaters right now. And I think, I think it did fairly well. I know it's going to get drowned out a lot more, but yeah. Renfield was a lot of fun. It's quick. I feel like there might have been a lot of fat that they trimmed out of it, but yeah. It's exactly how I'd like, a fun dose of gory comedy. So it's a good film. Good film. Maybe not as great as it could have been. I feel like maybe if they spent a little bit more time building up the toxic relationship and finding ways to combat it, because the way that it kind of resolves itself is a little bit too fast and a little bit too easy, I think. But at that point in the film, it's you know what, whatever. It's already having too much fun with this material, and I'm kind of on board with it. So yeah, it's a fun film. And now you close out our film with a film that isn't a comedy. This is the only film that we're going to review today that isn't a comedy. It's a drama, but kind of not a drama. You'll understand once we start talking about it. All right. So let me get my notes up here. And 3, 2, 1. So, On a Wing and a Prayer is a drama based on a true story of a man who had to make an emergency landing of a plane with his family on board, and the pilot was incapacitated and had to make a desperate landing. And I feel like the best way to describe why this film kind of doesn't work. I feel it's almost like I have to talk about the ending, because the ending of this film has the main character, Doug White, basically refusing all these offers because like his inspiring story attracts like a lot of attention. A lot of people say like, hey, you want to come on Ellen, you want to come on Oprah, and it's like, no, I don't want to do that. And yet instead we have this film, which I'll be honest, this film, like, it's weird. This came from MGM, but like but it also came from Lightworkers Media, which is a Christian studio. And yes, this is very much like, this is a film that could definitely play on like PureFlix. And what I mean by that is not just that, like, it has like a Christian element to it where, like, you know, all the characters are Christian and they have that moment where they pray to God and like a miracle will happen. All that happens in the film, but it's also made to be very safe and very, very safe and tactile with its direction. Like, the way that it sets up Doug, played by Dennis Quaid, and the rest of his family, like his wife, played by Heather Graham, is very boring. Like, they set them up as, like, you know, like this fun-loving family. They kind of joke around, but they make just these mundane, kind of like tedious jokes. Like, they have a whole thing where they're at a barbecue event, and they have, you know, that one moment where like their teenage daughter's just like, oh, I don't want to be here, and they're just like, you know, you need to show some respect for this family. And they talk about how, you know, oh, when we were young, you know, you used to be able to spank kids, and, you know, wasn't that a great era, and just all this nostalgic longing for the past, and just like, you know, oh, the world's gone too PC. Like, it doesn't go overboard with that, because, you know, it needs to be like a little bit more palatable, that, you know, they could push this out onto Amazon Prime. But you can sense that tone throughout. Like, this is definitely like a very, this is a film that takes itself way too like safe and serious. So by the time you get to the moment where, like, you know, Doug gets on the plane, like, you know, it's Easter, and, you know, the pilot's, you know, the pilot's incapacitated. So like Doug, a man who he has a little bit of experience with piloting, not a lot, but then he has to like pilot a plane, and he has to have like the tower walk him through it. And it's just like there's desperation in his voice, and like, you know, there's a ticking clock, you know, with like the weather that's become unpredictable, and, you know, keeping in mind like everything that's going on up in the air. And so at that point, the film pretty much like switches on autopilot and fluctuates between being like a very tactile film by only focusing on like the science of it, almost kind of like, you know, like a little bit like an Apollo 13, where it's all about, you know, how do we land this plane and how do we work out the logistics of it, and then going between that and just, you know, like the standard Christian element of just like, you know, you have to pray, you know, and the whole thing is like set up with, you know, Doug has recently lost a friend, so, you know, and he's not sure about like the afterlife either. And it, like I said, it's definitely one of those Christian films, because they set up Doug as this person who's kind of lost his faith. Like, he's lost his best friend, and he's just like, you know, I think God did this to him. And that's why it's like, no, it's not God's fault. God's everywhere, and you got to let God into your heart. And of course, at that point, that should have like set off, you know, alarm bells in everyone's mind. Like, yes, this film is going to be all about Doug trying to find his faith and pray that he can land this plane. And it's just as hokey as you would expect this type of film to be. Complete with, like, you know, having like the prayer before they land, complete, you know, with, you know, like, you know, characters casually talking about God, and even having like the almost laughable moment at the end where the ghost of his dead friend comes back and says, like, you know, I knew you could do this if you just had faith. And then, you know, the sappy music plays, and, you know, everyone's safe, and it's just a very heartwarming story. That's very boring. and I say like it's boring because like this does feel like material that you could make thrilling, but I feel like it's so focused on trying not to like bring out like the thrilling aspects of it, and just focus on like kind of like the more exact science of weather and how planes, you know, are up in the air and how they land, that it loses track of trying to make this exciting. Like, there's a lot of scenes where just like characters are just talking about, how a plane can go through the sky and how it can land, and then just having a lot of melodrama piled on top of it, along with, all of like the ham-fisted Christian elements. And the thing is, it's not that you couldn't make a film like this work and still, highlight these aspects of like, finding faith. I feel like that's something that you could do if enough effort was put into it, where it just didn't feel like it was ham-fisted in so clearly and without much like cleverness or thought. So it was weird. It almost felt like this film was getting close to being like a very like thrilling film about like, a family trying to land a plane, and then it just, like I said, it just flips on autopilot, and just like the film pretty much writes itself by the end of the first act. And not in like a very exciting or clever way, especially outside of like Dennis Quaid and Heather Graham. I mean, maybe Jesse Metcalf as the Carrie in the film, she's okay, but everyone else just kind of feels like an amateur actor, and I feel like a lot of that has to do with like kind of the script they're given and the tone that they're going through for here, that it just it doesn't work. It feels very much like a film that would have been thrown direct to video or just like slammed onto PureFlix, and here it is on Prime Video, and it's just, and I think like mostly because like it's directed by Sean McNamara, that this film is getting a lot more exposure, and like and that it went as far as it did with its promotion. So I wish that this film could just, not just feel like a PureFlix film and just feel, way too boring with this concept, but unfortunately it is. And I kept waiting for it to, I hate to use the pun, but like I kept waiting for this film to take off and find its groove and not just become just like, it felt like a TV movie of the week, if that makes any sense. Like it wants to tell this true story, but it doesn't want to dramatize much of it, which you would understand if like there was some interest in like, the tactile nature behind it, but it just piles on so much melodrama on top of that to really push the Christian element that it just ends up being boring. It's such a mundane, forgettable film. That's I doubt it, unless you're in a Christian family that just needs a very safe film that has planes in it. I can't see myself recommending this film to anyone. So yeah, On a Wing and a Prayer is currently playing on Prime Video. If you're curious. So yeah, not a very good film. But hey, we talked. At least we got some fun. We got some comedy films out of it, and yeah. All right, let's get a little outro music here as we recap everything that we did today. All right, so quick recap of the films that we reviewed on today's stream. We reviewed Beau is Afraid, Ari Aster's new surreal psychological horror film that has some surprisingly comedic elements in it. It's a great film. I absolutely loved it, but I have to say, if you're not willing to sit through it, and if you're not willing to give an unpredictable film a chance, this is not going to be your film, and it's not going to be everyone's film. Like, a lot of people are going to walk out of this film hating it, but hey, for being as experimental as it was, I love the hell out of it. I say more of it. We also reviewed Renfield, which was a pretty good horror comedy that finds interesting aspects to highlight on Renfield being in a toxic relationship with Dracula. And the big reason, of course, is to go see Nicolas Cage as Dracula. He's having a lot of fun in it. And also, another selling point, I would say, is the gore and the violence, which is wonderfully over the top, beautiful, bloody, brutal, and ridiculous. And then we reviewed On a Wing and a Prayer, a film which tries to take a true story and give it a very melodramatic Christian glaze, and it really doesn't work, despite the decent two big names of it, Heather Graham and Shoot, I forgot his name. Dennis Quaid, of course. Despite the casting and, Sean McNamara's directing, it's a bland film. Bland and dull as dishwater. So what do we got coming up? Well, I'm going to try to see a few films towards the end of April here. I'll see if I can get around to seeing Evil Dead. A few other films that are coming down the pike. And I will definitely, and I'm going to see if, I'm thinking I'll probably do like a Thursday stream for it. It's going to be a little late, but I'm going to try to get an early review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So that's coming up. So in about 2 weeks, not 2 weeks exactly, but like, not this Thursday, but next Thursday, I'm going to try to shoot for another review stream where we'll have an early review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So, I hope you enjoyed the stream. If you like what you saw and you want to see more early movie reviews, you can read my movie reviews on movieswithmark.com, also filminquiry.com and twincitiesgeek.com. Filminquiry.com, in particular, is worth going to because those reviews that I post on there end up going to Rotten Tomatoes. So you can see my reviews for like Super Mario Brothers and Renfield over on Film Inquiry. And if you like what you saw and you want to see more early movie reviews, be sure to subscribe. Hit the like button. Do all that jargon that everyone begs you for. You know what to do. If you've been on YouTube, you know what the score is. I'm not going to walk you through it. So, yeah, we will be back in 2 weeks with a review of a few films that I haven't quite decided on, but definitely for sure Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Because it's going to be May by that point, and we're going to be into the summer movie season. So a lot of big films coming up. Barbie film, Oppenheimer, and what else? Fast and the Furious. Wouldn't be summer without Fast and the Furious film, man. So we'll get to all that. I'll check back with you later. You can watch the reviews will be up on here later. I've got more video essays coming down the pike that I'm working on. I finished a few scripts. I'm working on editing a few. And I actually have a little bit more footage left over from Anime Detour, which I might be posting. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon. I'm currently working on a book on Saturday morning cartoons, which you can read entries through there as I'm finishing them. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time. See you next time.